to show you now is an amalgam of 25 years worth of kind of experience and how we've arrived at the way we now currently charge. So it's supposed to be a case study, but actually it's probably not really a specific case. Well, it is a case study. In fact, it's a house that we priced in Mayfair. But it's the build-up of everything that we've learned about what clients do and don't respond to over 2.5 decades. And the other thing I really want to say just before we kick off is that design has value. And that's the thing that you need to take away from this. If you take nothing else away, design has value. We as a business try and live and survive on the design fees that we charge. We charge for what we do. We charge for the drawings we do and the specifications that we produce and the schedules that we produce and the paperwork that we produce. And any profit that we earn on FF&E, we consider that as buds, and that's profit. But you know what we do. So I'm going to show you how we set out our design fee proposals. No two designers charge in the same way. There isn't a right way, there isn't a wrong way. You just have to work out what works for you. What I'm going to show you now is how we do it and what works for us. If someone presents you with a really complicated project, perhaps being done in 4 or 5 phases over 2 or 3 years with multiple planning applications associated with it and lots of different kind of phases of work, how do you actually go about pricing that? You know, what is the process of sitting down and unpicking to make sure that you've covered off the following things? So how can you be sure that you have actually included for everything? Because I think, as we've already discussed, it's so easy to miss something and then find that it's very hard to go back and say to the client, ooh, I didn't tell you we needed to charge you 25 hours for producing SketchUp models or whatever it might be. So you have to really sit down and think about what they want. How can you be sure that you know what the client is asking for? How do you make sure the client has understood exactly what you mean? How do you manage your client's expectations? That's a really tricky one. How can you avoid over-delivering, which is doing stuff for free? How can you ensure that you get treated like a professional? And how can you make sure you get paid? And the answer to all those questions is right there in your fee proposal. So I peppered this with a few images just to cheer it up. Otherwise it was going to be death by PowerPoint, which I hate. So the first thing to say is, don't be frightened to state the obvious. When we go to a client, I meet a client for the first time, I will take a brief, and then if at the end of the meeting we've agreed that we like each other enough that we might possibly want to work together, I'll say to the client, okay, I am going to go away and I'm going to restate to you exactly what it is that you've told me. I'm going to write down the brief as I understand it so that you can check it, and then once you've checked it, that will become the basis of our agreement. So this is, dear client, somewhere in London, further to your email and our subsequent discussions, it's my pleasure to provide you with a fixed fee proposal for the interior design. And this is where I also split this out. Interior design, interior decoration, which is FF&E design, and styling, if they want that too. So they're 3 quite separate parts to the puzzle. Thank you so much, always thank them obviously. And then our proposal is based on the client brief as I understand it, which I have detailed below and which outlines your specific requirements for this space. And we do that for both residential and for commercial clients. So the first thing to identify is what actually is the project. Is it a house? Is it a house that they're going to live in themselves? Is it something that they're doing as a development? Is it a block of flats? Is it a restaurant? Whatever it might be. So you have to state what is the project. And then you have to say, where is the project? So what is the building? Is it a new build? Is it a renovation? Is it a listed building? Is it in a conservation area? What are, any obvious kind of constraints? And how is it currently being used? Because that way you're flagging how you're going to take it from what it is currently to what you're going to turn it into. And then what does the client want to do to it? Is it going to be a 80 cover restaurant, or is it going to be a bar, or is it going to be a conference centre, or what are they going to do to it? And then within that, what has the client asked you to do? Now, part of that's going to depend a little bit on which other professionals are involved. So if it's a project that has an architect, the architect might be doing some elements of it, you might not be doing the whole thing. So, you need to actually work out exactly what the client has asked you to do. And the client may not know what they're asking you to do. That's the other thing to say. So you have to state it back to them, and that way you can test their assumptions. The assumptions for this one was the project is not turnkey. In other words, they didn't want the cupboards filled with towels. The proposals are based on drawing numbers, blah, 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 and blah from the architects. So you've stated which drawings you're referring to. We will be working as part of a broader project team who will include lead consultants and architects, contractor, M&E consultant, audiovisual consultant, and a structural engineer. I have assumed that your architects will be responsible for all liaison and negotiations with the head lessee, party wall surveyors, and structural engineers. We will be responsible for the planning of the space, and so on and so on and so on. So state clearly any assumptions that you are making, because again, if you can iron out all this stuff right at the outset, it just makes the whole thing so much more smooth. Then once we've done that and we've stated the brief back to the client, the next thing we do is we start to detail out our services and the fees that we're charging for those. The first thing we do is we state what form of contract are we basing our agreement on. Now, we always use the British Institute of Interior Design contracts that are co-published with the RIBA. They're fantastic contracts and they represent a really good balance of risk between the client and the interior designer. So they protect you, but they also protect the client. So we base our contracts on that's the contract that we use. And then the other thing is, have you been provided with accurate CAD drawings? Because are you going to be doing the survey? Has the survey already been done? Are you going to get someone else in to do the survey? If you're going to get someone else in to do the survey, make sure you state that the fee to do the survey is not included within your fees. Mrs. Client, would you like me to get a price for that for you? Yes, please. And you can arrange that and you can kick the whole process off. So you just need to make sure that you kind of know what your starting point is and your kick-off. And then the next thing we do is we break down our proposal into logical chunks. We roughly follow the RIBA stages of works. So I'm sure you're all familiar with that, so I won't go into them. And there are PDFs online. You can just Google RIBA stages of work phases, and you'll get it right up there. We also work out other consultants and who there will be on the project so that we know what our responsibilities are. And we also state whether we're going to be the lead designer, in which case we're holding the kind of key set of drawings and everybody else is feeding their information into us, or whether, for example, the architect is the lead designer, at which point we're feeding information back to him. Because if you're the one doing all the coordination, it's a lot more time involved and you need to charge for that, so you need to be aware of that. Are you responsible for CDM? Are you the lead designer on the project, which is safety? We also are very clear about how many meetings and how many sets of revisions we have included within each and every phase. So the first phase typically will be the actual space planning and the concept design. So we come at it from two angles. We come at it from the sort of practical space planning aspect and also then how it's going to look. So those two pieces together form the puzzle. And we will always say to the client, we have allowed within this phase for 2 meetings and 1 set of revisions, or 3 meetings and 2 sets of revisions, depending on how complex the project might be. But it means then that if they suddenly want 5 meetings, you can go back to them and say, I'm terribly sorry, but in actual fact, we've had your allocation of meetings for this particular phase, and we are going to have to charge you a bit more for that. Is that okay? And be very clear about it so that you've always stated what it is that you're charging for. And you do charge if the allocation is exceeded. And then after you've got to that point where you've planned the space, and this, you need to write this in your fee proposal as well, we always say, we would then ask you to freeze the drawings. And this means that you will make no further changes to the plans, which allows the detailed design to commence. Because if you're trying to detail out bathrooms and somebody else is still moving the walls around, you're going to end up doing it 10 times. And again, you're going to find it very, very difficult to be able to go back and charge for all that time that you've spent. That old chestnut, time is money. So work out how long it takes you to do things. I would suggest developing a ready reckoner, and what I mean by that is we know in my office, and it's only just because we've been doing it for years and years, that it's going to take us, probably an hour to do a bathroom, for example. If it's a very complicated bathroom, it might take 2 hours. Then you might have 4 elevations. If it's a very complex one, it might be a sort of 3 or 4 hour job to produce the elevations to go with that. Make sure you allow the time that it takes to specify the sanitary ware to go with that bathroom. Make sure you allow the sourcing time, and make sure you allow enough time to populate the schedules if you're using that sort of documentation. So all those things, and just by doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, you kind of can know that if it's a simple one, it's going to take you 5 hours. If it's a complicated one, it's going to take you 8 hours, and it just makes your pricing quite quick. You won't be always right. You'll win some and you'll lose some, but mostly you'll kind of come out roughly square, I hope. The other thing to bear in mind is, what are your drawings actually going to be used for? Are they construction drawings, or are they in fact what we call design intent drawings? And the difference is really paramount. If you do joinery drawings, for example, you're designing beautiful cabinetry, are those drawings going to then be passed? Are they design intent drawings, which means that they then go off to the joinery workshop and the joiner produces the shop drawings, and then they come back to you just for checking? Or are you actually detailing it out in so much detail that you're actually telling someone how to build it? So be aware of and state the purpose of your drawings. Say these are design intent drawings, or these are construction drawings, or these are, drawings for review. And that obviously will have, how detailed they need to be will follow on from what the drawings are going to be used for. Are 3D images required? And if 3D images are required, what sort? Are we talking about photorealistic CGIs, or are we talking about SketchUp models? State exactly what you're going to provide. Are you providing fully rendered models, or is it just something very basic so that the client gets the sense of the space? And will you be overseeing the work on site? Now, there are different ways of charging for how you oversee site work. A lot of people historically have charged a percentage of the build cost. Fees on any project will be somewhere between 10 and 15% typically, and within a bigger team, the interior designer's portion of that will be around about 7 to 8%, generally speaking. That's what most QSs will work it out at. So it depends how big the project is. But we have found over the years that we now no longer charge for a percentage on the visits, of the build, because again, it's sort of not fair on the client a bit. If it's a very expensive build, then they're paying an awful lot of money for something. You're still doing the same, you're still spending the same amount of time. So what we will do is we will calculate a cost per visit. So it might be your travelling time both ways, plus 2 people on site for half a day, once a week, and then all the follow-up that you need to do when you get back to the office. So maybe it's a day's worth of follow-up every time you do a site visit. And that might be once a week, it might be once a month, and we will always state in the fee proposal, this is based on our assumption that this project is going to run for 52 weeks, and we have allowed for 56 site visits within that period. Always build a few in at the end, because you have to be paid for your snagging time. Somebody has to go back and pick up all the bits that the builder hasn't done. So if you haven't allowed for that, again, you won't get paid for it. And then finally on this sheet, sanity check your totals. Now, there are lots of ways you can do this. You can look at, I think you touched on some of them, you can look at a pounds per square foot spend. You can look at the price of the budget. You can look at the price of the purchase price of the property. You can look at an allowance per square foot. But if you look at what you think the total project cost is going to be, and then check your fee back against it and see if you're coming out between that 10 and 15%, then you'll know that you're in the right ballpark and that you haven't kind of stepped. Because typically, often we are in competition with several other designers when we go up for this work, and you do need to be pricing realistically, although it does need to be thorough. Okay, and then this is what I was saying, transparency rules. So other things that we state on our fee proposal, we always say what our hourly rate is. Depending on the size of your team, people will have a rate typically for a director, for a senior designer, and then for a more junior member of staff, and obviously you charge less for a junior. We always say how much that is, so that when we say if you've overstepped, if you've exceeded your allocation on this particular phase, and we will do that. We will either apply our hourly rate of X pounds, or we will do it for a pre-agreed fee. We also state what our disbursements are. Do we charge for printing? Do we charge for travelling time? All those other bits and pieces that you might need to charge them for. Other people's fees. Be very clear about anything else that you're talking about, and make sure that you state, you are going to need a structural engineer. This person's fees are not included within mine. And then the other thing we also do is we always say who will be on the design team, because resourcing of projects is really, really, really important. Your client needs to know that you're giving enough weight to their project that they feel really confident that you're going to do this in a professional manner. So I always say the project will be overseen by me, but it will be actually driven by my senior designer X and supported by Y and Z, and actually name them. And we have CVs in the office. Commercial clients quite often like to see the CVs of the people that are going to be appointed to their projects. commercial clients quite often also will want to see a breakdown. They'll want to see that the hours you've allocated for each of those people actually tallies back to your total fee. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often because it's a nightmare, but anyway. Late night phone calls and late night emails. I know sometimes clients can be very, very, very difficult, and they'll phone you on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening and that sort of thing. It's fine to say no. And I would say, you know, we are available, say it in your fee proposal, we are available within normal business hours, you know, we're available on reasonable notice. So you're just quietly giving them a message that you'll be there for them, but you won't necessarily pick up the phone at 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening. Late night emails, though, I think are a slightly different thing, because I think quite often people in this day and age, they're not expecting you to respond. What they're doing is they're mentally downloading something that they've just thought of, and they want to do it then before they forget. So don't worry too much about the emails. That can wait till Monday morning, but certainly with the phone calls, you know, you just have to be quietly, just say you're not going to take them, really. How do you charge your clients for the things you buy? Architects and other professionals don't charge for the things they buy. You know, the contractor always purchases things. Architects look at us and they think, why are they doing that? Actually, more and more architects are now doing interior design, so they know exactly why we're doing it. It's because it's a great way to make money. But as a consequence of this, I think interior designers can have a bad reputation because they're not transparent in their interactions with their clients, and they're the sort of old school of, you know, here's a lab, how much do I think I can charge for it? How much can I get away with charging for that? Has left a really sour taste in lots of people's mouths. So it's just I think there is definitely a move in the industry for people to be much more transparent and to base what they're doing on the fees that they can earn from the design work that they do, not from the FF&E. I have an open book policy. In my business, we charge for FF&E, we charge the best trade price that I can negotiate, plus a flat across the board markup. Sometimes it means that it's a little bit over retail, mostly it'll be under retail, but it's a complete open book policy, and it means that the client can come into my office, they can pick up any file, any folder, look at any piece of paper, and they will be able to see exactly what they've been charged and why. And then finally, the risk, and we touched on this earlier, that there's this whole thing about if you are acting as a retailer, you take on the risk for things not being right. And it can, you know, people have gone into liquidation as a result of something going horribly wrong with something that they've supplied. And that's kind of it, actually. I've probably frightened you all to death.